The IT sector, it was under pressure because of that bill which is being introduced, the Protect and Grow American Jobs Act. What will be the impact, the long-term impact of that? The short-term and long-term impact. We have Sudin Apte joining us, and Moshe Katri is also with us. Good morning, gentlemen. Moshe, let me start with you because, it's the Indian IT is already facing a lot of headwinds. Even before, the whole Trump rhetoric began, we saw the kind of derating in Indian IT companies. From here on, do you see these headwinds getting stronger now? And do we see more derating for IT stocks?
Yeah, so I think what we should do is really separate what's kind of the myth out there and reality and practicality. The bill that's being reintroduced by Darrell Issa has been around for a couple of years. He actually tried to pass it towards the end of last year, and it did not go through. The bill specifically talks about raising the minimum wages you're paying for H1B visa employees from about $60,000 a year to about $100,000. In practicality, a lot of if you look at most of the new guys that are coming on board with H1B visas, they're actually getting paid an annual compensation already close to that $100,000 number that we're talking about. So in practicality, most of the vendors in the group are already dealing with this rising wage, quote unquote, issue or concern. So what we need to do is look at the worst case scenario and where in our view, things are going to go from here. Worst case scenario, the H1B visa program pretty much gets terminated. Now, is that actually possible or feasible? And there's a lot of rhetoric out there. And if you think about this new administration claims to be very, very pro-business. Last time, Big Durban tried to do something very similar, which turned out to be extremely disruptive to businesses. There was a big backlash, and this is why his effort or his initiative pretty much was pulled back. And I think ultimately the big business is going to come back, especially those companies that are heavily dependent on offshoring, pretty much relaying to this new administration that this is going to be very disruptive from their perspective. In practicality, in terms of where this is going to go, so what we do think is that the legislation will continue to focus on a couple of things. One, the cap itself. I don't know if that's going to change much. It's sitting at about $65,000 a year, and it's significantly down from where it was before, and I think that probably stays the same. H1B visa application fees, that's up significantly in the past 4 to 5 years, and that probably continues to rise. And then raising the minimum wage requirements, which is something that's been going on as well. And I think that most vendors have been set up for this. Most vendors are dealing with this. And if you think about this, you will continue to see a reduced dependence on the program because what's offshoreable will get offshore, and what's not, which is predominantly the new digital work, you're actually going to hire locally anyway. You're not even using the H1B visa program for that. So net, I think it's going to be still business as usual. You're going to get noise, but that's very typical before and after an election, maybe even after this one. But in practicality, I don't know if you're going to see a major impact here in terms of disruption.
Moshe, what will you do to your own investments? Will you incrementally add to any of your investments or probably trim them or just keep pat?
Yeah, we actually released our 2017 spending survey on Friday. And we have been, before the survey, very cautious on the group. From our perspective, the group has been having a lot of challenges on a secular side just because of a lot of the legacy services have been moving into alternative platforms like cloud and software as a service, so you're definitely seeing cannibalization from that. But we've also noted cyclical issues where certain verticals like financial services have really been weak for a couple of years now. The survey kind of told us that we are going to see some uptick in spending in 2017. What was more encouraging to us was what we've seen actually an uptick even in financial services in 2017. And I think a lot of it is a function of many of the banks believing there's going to be some sort of a regulatory relief coming in from this new administration. So we actually decided to upgrade a couple of names that have a very large financial services exposure. So we have upgraded Cognizant, we upgraded Virtusa, and the third one we upgraded was actually Luxoft. We think that the sentiment is very negative. I think that will be helpful. The valuations are depressed, and the outlook seems to be maybe not in March, but for the year will probably be a bit better than expected.
Okay, that's a very interesting, different and positive view that we've got from you, Moshe, very different from what we've heard from the other experts. Let's get Sudin Apte into this discussion. Sudin, good morning. So as Moshe was saying, many of these companies are already dealing with a $100,000 wage bill. The bill has been around for some years. So do you also believe that we're looking at very limited impact on earnings because of the reduced dependency of this H1B scheme in any case?
Well, first I must give a caveat that we are talking about a bill and not the law. So the possibility of a passage of a bill always is limited in U.S. context, especially some of such bills who have been, which have been attempted in the past. So that's really a first caveat. I think, as far as I'm concerned, the protectionism is growing for last few years, and we have been talking on your show also, in last 6 to 8 months, a few times on how various countries, not only U.S. but also, for example, UK, raising the protectionism and creating either the barriers in terms of additional procedures, higher costs for doing business, etc. So that surely irritant will increase. Now, $60K to $100,000 base salary level, I do believe that the 60K number will eventually go up, and we may settle somewhere in between in next 12 to 18 months. Now, if you look at how much it impacts the total offshore companies' onshore resources, there are two components to it. One is the staff augmentation business, which actually substantially gets impacted because most of the staff augmentation happens at a rate which is lower than the $85 per hour billing rate and typical experience of 1 to 2 years to 5 to 6 years. That business gets impacted. Now, if you look at the onshore resources of larger companies like, Infosys, Cognizant, TCS, etc., our assessment, and this is a quick assessment, I must say, a third of the resources are in the bracket which are lower than $85 billing rate. And 100K salary don't mean 100K bill to client. There is a company overhead, there's a management cost, there's a cost of transportation, T&M cost. Range of those costs are there on top of that 100K. So $80 to $85 rate is what we feel, if 100K becomes real. And again, this is speculation. So I do believe that a third of the business for Indian IT companies can get impacted if this happens. Now, one has to also think that is it really a right resource that you should be exporting? And possibly the answer to that is no. If you look at subject matter experts, architects, consultants, senior resources, those essentially would be higher than that billing threshold that I talked about. So it's a really lower end of the work which Indian IT companies do in the US, and staffing, which will get impacted more than anything else if this bill becomes a reality.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us with that take on what happens to IT